Hey everyone, welcome to another video in the Reasons and Resources series, and long may this run. I mean, the idea is this is just an ongoing thing that I've really got into. I've noticed it's proving popular, thanks to everybody that's subscribed as a result of this series, and yeah, this will just run until I've basically run out of programming languages. I wanted to name check this book again because we're doing C++ in this video, and it may look like, if you look at the programming polyglot where I sort of map out the route at the moment, and I'll be adding to this. We go between fairly well-known languages to slightly more obscure, slightly backwards and forwards, and that's part of it is because I've structured the course of the languages using this book as my guide. So yeah, that's why it takes the form it does. But once we get, and I'm trying to think up to here, yeah, I'm just adding these as I see fit, as things interest me, or I feel that maybe they've been missed out. So yeah, that's roughly the course this is tracking to. But I highly recommend this book. It's really cool. And I was trying to think, like, what is my main obsession with programming? And this phrase here really stuck out and resonated with me. And that's programming patterns. I am fascinated by programming patterns. The patterns that different languages form when you have them on the page, and that's why I'm also really interested in reading code, and the stuff that Feline Herman's done, those sort of things, which I'll probably get around to talking about in a My Life in Objects episode, because I recently bought the book by Feline about I think it's called the programmer's brain. So yeah, that's a really good read, and I'll report back at some point. I am doing a My Life in Objects video about that, and so you can see what the book looks like. So let us dive into Reasons and Resources for Learning C++. So this has been around for a while now. 1985 was when it first appeared, and of course built on and influenced by other languages, specifically C, via this C with classes shenanigans. And BCPL is also another interesting language to check out if you have a chance as well. Sort of on that C, C++, C whatever roadmap. There's some interesting influencers and side quests that you can go down as well with all of this. So high level general purpose language. So 5 reasons why you might want to learn it. But first of all, I sort of explain my reason for becoming interested in language. And I think what it was that it was a natural just progression from finding out about C. So sometime, I think in the mid 80s, I was doing a lot of programming in whatever flavour of BASIC was around at that point. So it would have been QBasic, I think, in MS-DOS, via GW Basic, previously via Commodore Basic, and also taking a bit of a side quest down the whatever basic Apple was running at the time. And then as a result, I suppose, of working in an environment where code was used to create assisting programs for numerical taxonomy. Now, the predominant language there, in terms of what the in-house developers were using, was Pascal, and then they switched to C, And it was really, I suppose, after I left that firm, so probably sometime probably what, early 90s. Yeah, it could have been any time between when I was still at the firm, which would have been like the late 80s into the early 90s, where I sort of picked up the C programming language, which I've got off to the side here, Kerrigan and Ritchie. And then from that, it was a natural progression on to C++. So mine was just, I suppose my reason was just a quest to say, okay, I know these sort of fairly easy to understand high level languages that are, mainly taught at school or academia. Pascal, I'd sort of had to be able to read because the code in-house was written in Pascal, and someone wanted me to do an implementation for the PC in Quick Basic, a particular feature, just as a prototype. And at that point I was sort of working on mainly process improvement stuff, and I suppose what back then you would call decision support systems and document preparation software. And as a result of needing to look at the underlying algorithms that made up the things that were being done in numerical taxonomy, I needed to understand Pascal. And then when they switched over to C, like I said, that piqued my interest. So there's all that sort of bubbling away. And then over the years, I've sort of dabbled in C++. At some point, I think I had to write a DLL for a demo in a accounting system, which you could use. You could call DLLs, and one of the clients wanted an animated icon for some reason. I can't remember what the logic behind it was. I think they needed two things. They needed animated icons, and they needed a way of having accessibility assistant on certain buttons. So it would actually say the name of the item. It was a stock control system that we were building, and the system was in like a 4GL language, but it allowed calls to DLLs, and so I ended up having to write a small little couple of DLLs. It would have been in C++. I can't remember specifically what compiler I used, which allowed me to do very crude text to speech and also animation. So yeah, that's really, I suppose, the times when I've used it. There was one other time when I needed to do something fast. I think I was working in it was a support desk for a rental and retail sale to do with electronic point of sale, and we used to have to calculate I think, what was it called? It was rather ominous, early termination. So basically, if you decided to wrap your rental contract up early, there were ways out of that, but you had to pay like a certain early termination fee. And I remember the spreadsheet that we used for it was just rubbish. And so just as a project, like a side project, I sort of wrote this little, I don't know, command line thing, which, you plugged in some information and it spat out the early termination fee. And so that was probably another time. And I'm trying to remember more recently. I think probably there was a time, I think when I was dabbling with doing API calls to Last.fm through their and I was looking at different things I could do. I think in the end I ended up my first attempt at that was in Java until I switched over to doing it in Python. But at some point I think I dabbled with C++ because I'd installed an IDE on my system which had C++ in it as well. Anyway, so that's my basic reasons for using and revisiting C++. Beyond the little demo related stuff where I was working in a firm, so it was sort of used it was used as a prototype, which ultimately could have been used in production, but yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've written that's been used in production. The closest that probably came was that demo, and the other one, we did use the early termination CLI to do stuff, but that was all in-house. So, yeah. There's nothing out there in the wild. But other reasons, which dovetail onto, I suppose, the reasons why I selected it. So performance and efficiency. So yeah, speed. We've got low level control over memory. It's nice as well because if you've had exposure to C and you see certain limitations in some ways, and you don't want to spend ages, developing your own extensions, then you've got with C++, of course, you've got the object-oriented shenanigans there. Other things, versatility and adaptability. Yep, very versatile, use it for lots of different things. Although I do notice, over time, I think what tends to happen, and this happens with other languages, is certain languages become a certain, I wouldn't say de facto standard, but, they almost seem like a go-to in certain eras, certain zeitgeists, for certain domains. And you might find this with other languages where all of a sudden you find, that's interesting, a lot of people that work within X, say video games or other things, seem to be all using a particular language at a certain time. And I often get the impression that seems to be a thing a bit with C++ over the years is sometimes, you start exploring a domain and then you discover that, a lot of the stuff seems to be written in this language. As with a lot of these languages, C, C++, other ones, even extending out to, and I've done an episode on Factor, I find all of these languages which lean heavily into either a certain paradigm or may end up being used for certain system adjacent or low-level control, do give you insight into under the hood stuff that you may not get in other languages because that side of things is very much kept at arm's length. So, I can remember when I learned some of the, early languages that I learned, like BASIC, I didn't really have to get too involved with memory management. It only really came up when I started to write programs which had very large arrays, and there was a certain garbage collection thing that I ended up having to do. But generally, that's not something you have to encounter with a lot of languages. But what's nice is when you do encounter it and you have to deal with memory management or pointers or garbage collection or certain aspects to do with the way in which programs are compiled, you get this really nice insight into deeper understanding of languages. And that's particularly useful, I think, if you want to get into an area of writing your own compilers or even things like linters and parsers. It's a really useful sort of mind space to explore. Even though it's an older language, of course, whenever you see career opportunities out there, it's inevitable that you come across positions that require some form of C++. So yeah, that's another good argument, I suppose, for for learning it. It's a nice sip of peppermint tea there. Yeah, that's another good reason for learning it, because of what's that word? How ubiquitous, if I pronounce that correctly, how ubiquitous it is out there. And I suppose looping back again with the whole deeper understanding thing is, foundational languages. I think there's a lot of value in seeking out, if you don't already know them, these sort of so-called foundational languages. That's languages where there's a lot of other later languages that have been built on them and they're influenced by them. So, you've got things like either related syntax or concepts where, if you learn some languages, then your exposure to others gets a little bit easier. So you might find that learning C++, either learning another language or having previously learnt it's helpful. So that might include things like C, Java and C#. And don't forget, languages like C are constantly being updated. So languages that came after C also influence subsequent iterations, later versions of C. So yeah, there's this interesting cross-pollination going on, I suppose, particularly between things like C, Java, C#, but other languages as well. So you start to notice sort of logical structure, syntax, and the thing I mentioned earlier about programming patterns as well. Okay, so I'll include links to the various aspects of the C++ article on Wikipedia as a good starting point. You can dig away in there. Moving on, let's have a look at the technological usage, I suppose, by featuring my ever favourite developer survey. I'm still leaning heavily into 2024. Long-term viewers of this series will know they seem to have removed my favourite feature. So even though I'm going to look at some 2025 stuff, we'll look back at 2024, I think, for this series anyway. I can't resist it. So yeah, this one, which is most popular technology, is it's up there in amongst the C's, the C sharps, and the Javas. And this forms an interesting, top 10, I suppose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There you go. A top 10 of languages. Dare I say foundational languages? I don't know if that's really correct use of the term here, but certainly there's quite a number of languages here that have obviously a very large impact. So I don't think there's any harm in, forcing the hand of chance by focusing on this particular group here. But again, it's up to you or what you choose to focus on with your time. Here you can see admired and desired. This one, relatively speaking, it's interesting because we've spoken a bit before about these ones which have a very wide desired to admired, almost like a chasm. Relatively speaking, this one has probably one of the narrower chasms between desired on the one hand, which is a lower figure, and admired on the other hand. It's interesting to see some of the sort of tighter ones, although they're down the bottom end of the scale, so I don't know whether that's really due to just lack of stats. Things, funnily enough, like Visual Basic and MATLAB and VBA. But then again, it says not really very desired, and the admired is below 50%. So this is actually, it's not even getting up to 50%. It's interesting as well that you see the ones that sort of are in at the higher end of this. and the gap between the two is fairly small as well. It always fascinates me by these differences here. So rust, for instance, very highly admired, but not so much desired. And then, this was always my favourite, which I was rather sad when they removed, the top paying technologies. And the reason why I like this, not because it was top paying, but because you got to see the sort of stuff that was bubbling up almost from nowhere sometimes. And I really used to look forward to seeing this and say, oh yeah, I should take a look at this language. So you tend to find often this is a bit of an inverse of the previous ones. So, and of course it depends a lot on the language, but C++ is fairly far down here. Now, looking at this year's one, the most recent one, if we look at most popular, yet still no 2.4. I was hoping they might stick it in. There you go. So we're still there. Way up there. And let's have a quick look, if we can, at the admired and desired. So there, that is. And then finally, let's look at want to work with. Because I don't know if we really look, and you can see they're down here. This is an interesting chart. Okay, so on to other resources after sort of coming via this quick statistical look. So we have the C++ website for the current ISO. Okay, so this is the home of standard C++ on the web. So with all these series, I try and sort of go, if you like, to what might be, I suppose, the origin or the spring from which a lot of stuff emerges in terms of keeping up to date with the language as it develops over time. So yeah, a couple of websites related to that. Then we've got this website which crops up a lot when I sort of look online, although we do seem to be a bit inundated here with ads and various other things. But yeah, Learn C++. Loads of information on there. Then we also got things like Code Academy, which has this. Yep. You can sort of start off, go into a free course, boot camp, and away you go. Then, of course, there's this book. I don't know what they're up to now. When's the most recent? So there was fourth, which was 2013. That's the most recent. But I do have this one. The one that I have is an earlier edition, which is still when it was in that sort of grey cover. So I have a pretty early edition. Yeah. So I've got a soft cover grey one as well. So that's definitely worth dipping into. And of course it was written by the language creator as well. So the fourth edition covers C++ 11. Where are we up to now? I'm not too good at keeping up to date with this stuff. And of course, bear in mind with, you've got to be so careful with, but particularly C++ and C, I think it's quite important to work out what particular flavour you want to learn, and just work out for the particular domain you're working in. If you're learning it for the first time, try and find out what particular version of it people tend to sort of gravitate towards. And you can pick that up from a lot of places. I find any podcast episode where you get people discussing their in-industry use of either C, or in this case C++, are really useful, because often they'll go through like what particular version they're using and why. So you can learn a lot from that. So at least you can force the hand of chance and maybe start off from a version which is more commonly used in the particular ecosystem tool chain that you want to work in. Then a few videos to sort of inspire you if that's your thing. So one about why I created C++. Another one about how long it takes to learn the language. It's part of Udacity's, what is it? What do they call those? Nano degrees, yep. A full interview with the man himself. And then C++ Con channel as well. So I'll include links to all of those. C++ is on Exorcism. If you'd like to learn sort of this way by doing challenges. And then on my Programming Polyglot website, which I'm hoping to start digging away at sometime between now and the New Year, so the next 3 months, and fill in some of the gaps and carry on. I did do one on C++. So some code snippets there to play around with that work around the sort of main discussion points and programming patterns that are set out in that book that I spoke about at the top of the episode, Programming Explorations. So in there, it particularly covers things like binding and scope. Where was it? Yeah, functions closures, frames and argument passing. And a lot of these are obviously interrelated as well. Prototypes and classes, which is, related to frames and argument passing. Extensions. What else have we got here? Dispatch. You might be dispatching different things. Operators. And then control flow. So the point of focusing on these things, these programming patterns, matching, is that these all tend to come up in some shape or form, big or small, across programming languages. Type systems, type inference, and those two obviously heavily interrelated. Immutability as well. Persistent structures, processes and threads. And again, we're getting down to the areas where in some languages you might get more or less depending on what language you're in. Messaging and how that manifests itself in the language. Synchronization with some code examples which have all been checked. Pointers and garbage. And then, which you can use various techniques for. And then metaprogramming. And of course a lot of this is snapshots of those concepts. So yeah, so just a thing I put together because I wanted a way of sort of exploring programming patterns across the different languages, and I thought this is a great way to do it systematically. But because of that, it's a project where I, come and go from, and I've been going not working on as much as I did originally. But this one has been done, and we got a few more in the future, like Erlang, Elixir, those sort of things, Gleam as well. And yeah, once the idea is anyway with the channel generally, just to close off here, is I want to get into a position where I'm still keeping roughly the same content, but I don't have quite so many. So there's a core set of videos I release each week. There's 4 videos, and they form a pattern that repeats itself over 3 weeks. What I want to do in the new year is shift over to doing the same repeating pattern, but it occurs, the pattern repeats itself over 2 weeks, and it's only like three videos per week. So there's a set of like 6 core subject areas that I always cover, and currently they're done by spreading them over 3 weeks. So 2 chunks of 6 over 3 weeks with 4 videos a week, and I just want to switch it over to a 6 video chunk over 2 weeks with 3 videos per week. And once I do that, it'll give me more opportunity to put in wildcards and to focus back on stuff like this as well on other days and yeah, that sort of thing. So that's where I'm going. Anyway, well, thanks once again for everybody that continues to watch these videos and all the other videos on the channel, and subscribes. It is handy. I don't normally say like, comment, subscribe, but it is obviously really handy to subscribe to these videos, but to the videos particularly because of the fact that I do these various series as well. So that way you can sort of see when certain videos are appearing, if you're getting regularly pinged, and then you can sort of decide based on what you like, whether you want to watch it or not. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future video.